Rudyard Kipling. I'm sure you know the name. He was a Nobel Prize winner, author of some of the most beloved children's classics ever, a true literary giant of the British Empire. But honestly, his legacy is a puzzle. It's this fascinating mess of conflicting ideas that just leaves modern readers kind of scratching their heads. So let's dive in and try to piece together the man behind the myth.
And this right here is the central problem. On one hand, you've got the guy who gave us Mowgli and Baloo, the absolutely enchanting storyteller of the Jungle Book. And on the other, you've got the author of The White Man's Burden, a poem that basically became the anthem for colonialism. How do you get both of those from the same guy?
So here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to look at this tale of two Kiplings. First, the man who genuinely loved India. Then, we'll get into the Bard of the Empire. We'll try to decode his whole worldview by talking about paternalism versus prejudice. And finally, we'll try to make sense of his very, very complicated legacy.
Okay, so let's start with the side of Kipling that makes a simple label like racist feel, well, a little too simple. This is the man who had this incredibly deep, lifelong connection to the Indian subcontinent.
You know, his connection to India wasn't just some casual thing. He was born in Bombay. His first language was actually Hindustani, which he learned from his Indian nurse. And even after his parents sent him off to school in England, he came right back as a young man and just poured all of his experiences into his writing. His whole childhood was steeped in the sights, sounds, and languages of India.
And this is exactly what trips so many people up when they actually read his work today. Like this one Reddit user put it, when you read Kipling, you find this incredibly rich, deep understanding of the culture. It just doesn't feel like it's coming from a place of pure, simple hatred. So, what is going on here?
And you can really see this deep connection in his most famous work. I mean, Kim is still seen as one of the great novels about India. The Jungle Books are just filled with the spirit of the Indian wilderness. And poems like Gunga Din or Mandalay, yeah, they're complicated for sure, but they show this really empathetic, ground-level view of Indian life that you just wouldn't expect from a caricature of an imperialist.
Okay, but then there's the other Kipling, the one they call the Bard of the Empire. And this side of him, it paints a completely different picture. This is the unapologetic cheerleader for colonial rule.
And here we go. These are the infamous opening lines of The White Man's Burden. It's basically a call to action, telling Western powers to go out and take on the burden of colonizing and ruling over non-white people. I mean, there's not a lot of ambiguity there, right? This is the absolute cornerstone of his reputation as an imperialist.
And just in case you thought, oh, maybe it's satire? Nope. The history on this is crystal clear. Kipling offered this poem directly to Teddy Roosevelt as a piece of political lobbying. He was deadly serious. The goal was to get the American public on board with colonizing the Philippines, just like the British Empire had done elsewhere.
And look, his fierce political views weren't just about India. He was the first person to use the word Hun as a nasty insult for Germans. During World War I, he actually said there were only human beings and Germans in the world. He was fiercely against Ireland governing itself, and he even jumped into Canadian politics to try and stop a trade deal with the US. He saw the whole world through the lens of empire.
So how on earth do you square these two things? How do you reconcile these two sides of him? To do that, we got to move beyond a simple yes or no question about racism and really try to get inside the specific worldview of his time.
Which brings us right to the heart of it, doesn't it? How is it possible to have this deep, nuanced understanding of a people and their culture, and at the exact same time believe that they should be ruled over by an outside force? It seems like a total contradiction.
And the key idea to get your head around here is something called paternalistic racism. This isn't about active, violent hatred. It's a worldview built on this really condescending belief in your own superiority. It's the idea that your culture is so advanced that you have a moral duty to go and guide or civilize other so-called lesser peoples.
And I saw this quote from a Reddit user that just nails the mindset perfectly. It's like saying, I'm better than you, but it's not your fault, you poor, poor thing, for not being like me. Here, let me step in and help you. That right there, that captures the patronizing, we know what's best for you attitude that drove so much of the colonial project.
So just to be super clear on the distinction, active hatred is based on loathing and hostility. But this paternalistic view, it can actually come from a strange kind of condescending admiration. It sees other cultures as fascinating, maybe even noble savages, but ultimately views them as childlike and in need of firm parental guidance. You can almost see it in the Jungle Book, right? The wise animals teach Mowgli the law, a system they believe is for his own good. It's kind of the perfect metaphor.
And you have to remember, Kipling wasn't just some lone wolf with these ideas. This paternalistic thinking was the central justification for what was called New Imperialism back then. The argument was that the British Empire had this moral responsibility to go out and civilize the world. Kipling wasn't just reflecting his time, he was one of its most powerful voices.
So where does all this leave us? Well, with a legacy that is anything but simple. It is just filled with contradictions that tell us as much about his era as they do about the man himself.
And you know, there's probably no better metaphor for Kipling's own complicated legacy than his personal use of a symbol that would later take on a truly monstrous new meaning, the swastika.
Yeah, the story here is just fascinating. The swastika is an ancient Indian sun symbol. It means good luck and well-being. Kipling, as a nod to the culture that shaped him, put it on the covers of his books. But then, when the Nazi Party co-opted it, Kipling himself had it removed. A symbol he used to honor Indian culture became so tainted that he had to abandon it, a powerful echo of how his own legacy would be constantly reevaluated over time.
And then, his world completely shattered. Kipling had been a huge supporter of the war effort and even pulled strings to get his only son John a commission in the army. But John was killed in World War I. The grief and the guilt just broke something in him, and it led him to write this absolutely haunting line. If any question why we died, tell them because our fathers lied. That is not the voice of a simple warmonger. That's the cry of a heartbroken father questioning the very leaders and ideals he once championed.
That raw grief really reveals the man of paradoxes he truly was. He was described as someone who could reconcile extremes. He hated democracy, but he deeply believed in the strength and wisdom of the common soldier. He could write with incredible empathy about Indian characters while at the same time championing the empire that ruled over them. The man contained multitudes, and those multitudes were often at war with each other.
And so we're left with this question, and it's one that goes so much further than just Rudyard Kipling. How do we engage with the brilliant art of a creator whose views we now find deeply troubling? There is no easy answer, and that, maybe, is the most enduring part of Kipling's legacy.